I want to begin with a very simple choice. Imagine I offer you two options. The first option is $1 million today. No waiting, no complication. $1 million appears in your account right now. The second option is 1 penny today, and then that penny doubles every day for 30 days. Most people emotionally want the $1 million. That is understandable. $1 million is visible. A penny is not. $1 million feels like freedom. A penny feels like nothing. A penny feels insulting. It feels too small to matter. But this is exactly why most people misunderstand wealth. The human mind is not naturally built to understand compounding. It is built to understand what is obvious. It sees the $1 million and says, take it. It sees the penny and says, that is nothing. But if the penny doubles every day for 30 days, the result is not $1. It is not $1,000. It is not $100,000. It is over $5 million. That is the power of compounding. And the most important part of that example is not the final day. The most important part is how boring the beginning looks. On day 1, you have 1 penny. On day 2, 2 pennies. On day 3, 4 pennies. After 10 days, you still have only a little more than $5. If you did not understand the process, you would quit. You would say the strategy is useless. You would compare your $5 to someone else's $1 million and feel like a fool. But the process has not failed. It is only early. That is what most people do not understand about building net worth. The early stage feels slow because most of the work is still being done by you, not by the money. You are saving, you are cutting expenses, you are resisting temptation, you are working, you are trying to increase income, you are putting money into investments. And at first the investment return seems almost meaningless. You put in $10,000 and a 10% return makes $1,000. $1,000 is helpful, but it does not feel life-changing. Then you put in more. The balance grows. The return grows. The money begins producing money in amounts large enough to notice. And eventually, if you keep going, the system crosses a threshold. That threshold is why the first $100,000 matters so much. The first $100,000 is not magic because of the number itself. It is not that the universe sees the digits and suddenly rewards you. It matters because once you have $100,000 invested in working, the machine begins to behave differently. At 10%, $100,000 can produce $10,000 in a year. That is no longer a tiny amount. That is the same as saving almost $1,000 per month from your labor. It is the first moment when your money starts meaningfully helping you carry the load. Before that point, you are doing most of the work. After that point, your money begins doing a much larger share of the work. This is why net worth can feel like it explodes after $100,000. It is not because life becomes easy. It is not because risk disappears. It is not because compounding becomes smooth or guaranteed. It is because the size of the base becomes large enough that the return on the base is meaningful. A 10% return on $1,000 is $100. A 10% return on $10,000 is $1,000. A 10% return on $100,000 is $10,000. A 10% return on $1 million is $100,000. Same percentage, different life impact. This is why rich people have an enormous structural advantage. They do not only have more money, their money produces more money. The same market return that gives a beginner $100 can give a wealthy person $100,000. But the result is not equal. This is not fair or unfair. It is math. And when you understand the math, you stop complaining about the game and start trying to get to the point where the game begins helping you. That point, for many people, is the first $100,000. Now let us look at the compounding math in a more practical way. Suppose you can save and invest $10,000 per year. Suppose you can earn an average return of 10% per year over the long term. The return will not happen in a straight line. Some years will be down, some years will be flat, some years will be strong. But for simplicity, use 10% as the average in the first year. You invest $10,000 in the second year. Your first $10,000 earns money. And you add another $10,000. Now the account is larger. In the third year, there is more money, earning money, and you add another $10,000. The process continues. At first, most of the growth comes from your contributions. The money itself is not yet large enough to dominate the equation. You are the engine. In this example, it may take about 8 years to reach the first $100,000. That feels slow. 8 years can feel like forever when you are starting from zero. It feels like a grind. It feels like sacrifice. It feels like saying no over and over again while other people spend freely. But then something changes. The second $100,000 takes much less time, perhaps around 4 years. The third $100,000 may take about 3 years. Later, when the account is much larger, the portfolio may grow by $100,000 in a single year. It may grow by $100,000 in less than a year. That is the curve. The first 100,000 is the hardest because the portfolio is not yet doing enough work for you. Most of the first 100,000 has to come from your labor, your savings rate, your discipline, your ability to control expenses, and your ability to increase income. That is the uncomfortable truth. There is no shortcut around it for most people. The first $100,000 is built mostly by work and sacrifice. In the example of the first $100,000, roughly $72,000 may come from money you saved through labor and discipline. The rest comes from investment returns. That means the early journey depends heavily on your ability to create a gap between what you earn and what you spend. That gap is the beginning of wealth. Income alone does not create wealth. Spending less alone does not create wealth. The gap between income and spending creates the capital that can be invested. Once invested, capital begins compounding. Then compounding begins helping you. That is the sequence. Most people want compounding to save them before they have given compounding anything meaningful to work with. That is not how it works. You must feed the machine first. The machine helps later. This is why discipline matters so much early on. If your net worth is below $100,000, every dollar has a strategic role. A dollar saved is not just a dollar. It is a brick in the foundation. A dollar invested is not just a dollar. It is a worker you send into the world to create more dollars later. When your base is small, wasting money is more expensive than it looks. A person with $1 million invested can spend $50 and not feel the same long-term impact as someone trying to reach the first 100,000. The beginner needs momentum. The beginner needs every useful dollar. The beginner needs to shorten the distance to the compounding threshold. This is why the first stage requires focus. It requires living within your means. It requires spending less than you earn. It requires avoiding high-interest debt. It requires resisting lifestyle inflation. It requires making choices that may not be fun in the moment. That last part matters. The first $100,000 is often not built through comfort. It is built through short-term discomfort for long-term advantage. That does not mean you live miserably. A financial system built only on deprivation usually breaks, but it does mean you have to be honest about what matters. If your goal is to reach the compounding threshold, then many small purchases have to be judged by whether they are helping or delaying that goal. A dinner out may be fine. A daily pattern of unconscious spending may not be. A vacation may be fine if planned. A life built around finance consumption may not be. A car may be necessary. A car payment that absorbs your savings rate may be a serious mistake. The question is not whether you can enjoy life. The question is whether your spending is consistent with the person you say you want to become. This is where many people fail. They say they want financial freedom, but their spending says they want comfort today. They say they want wealth, but their habits say they want approval. They say they want to invest, but their budget says every dollar is already committed to consumption. The budget tells the truth. If you want the first 100,000, the budget must create the gap. Now, cutting expenses is important, but it is not the whole equation. Many people focus only on cutting. They cancel subscriptions, they stop buying coffee, they eat at home, they avoid new clothes, they try to save every possible dollar. That is useful to a point. But there is a limit to how much you can cut. You cannot cut rent below zero. You cannot cut food below zero. You cannot cut insurance below zero. You cannot cut basic transportation below zero. In a high inflation environment, many people are already spending mostly on essentials, and there is not much fat left to remove. This is why income growth matters. If you want to reach $100,000 faster, you need to attack both sides of the equation. Spend less than you earn more than you spend. Both matter. The income side is often neglected because it is harder. Cutting one expense can happen today. Growing income may require skills, negotiation, risk, job changes, side work, certifications, business building, sales ability, or geographic mobility. It may take time, it may be uncomfortable, it may require failing at things before the improvement appears. But the upside is much larger. You can only cut expenses so far. Income can grow much more. A person earning $40,000 and saving $5,000 has a 12.5% savings rate. If that person increases income to $60,000 and keeps lifestyle stable, the savings rate can rise dramatically. If they raise income to $80,000 while keeping expenses controlled, the journey to $100,000 becomes much faster. This is how people accelerate. They do not only cut, they expand capacity in life and investing. Capacity matters. If your income is too low relative to your basic costs, discipline alone may not be enough. You may need to increase income. That does not mean the system is easy. It means the solution must match the constraint. If the constraint is wasteful spending, cut spending. If the constraint is low income, build income. If the constraint is high debt, attack debt. If the constraint is lack of knowledge, learn. If the constraint is fear, create a simple system and start small. A good plan begins by identifying the true constraint. Most people do not do that. They copy advice that solves someone else's problem. Now, the first 100,000 also requires early investing. This is very important. Some people wait until they have a large amount of money before they begin investing. They say they will start when they have 10,000, 20,000, or 50,000 saved. But the early stage of investing is supposed to feel small. That is part of the process. You start with little money, the growth feels slow, you build the habit, you learn how the market behaves, you learn how your emotions behave. You see the boring part, then, years later, the boring part becomes the foundation for the exciting part. If you wait until you feel ready, you may delay the compounding curve. The sooner you start, the sooner you pass through the slow phase. This is why starting early matters so much. Even if the amount is small, the habit matters. A person investing $50 per Pascal Yek is not only investing $50. They are building the identity of an investor. They are training their mind to treat investing as normal. They are learning to buy consistently. They are learning to ignore short-term noise. Then, as income rises, the contribution can rise. The habit is already there. That is powerful. Many people think they need motivation. They do not. They need systems. A system takes money from the paycheck and invests it automatically. A system captures the employer match. A system contributes to retirement accounts. A system keeps cash for emergencies. A system increases contributions when income rises. A system does not depend on being in the mood. Mood is unreliable. Systems are durable. Now, where should the money go? A simple approach is often best. If you have access to a retirement plan through work, especially one with an employer match, the match should not be ignored. An employer match is part of your compensation. If you contribute enough to receive the match, you are getting money that would otherwise be left on the table. This is one of the few places in personal finance where the advantage is obvious. If someone offers you extra money to invest for your future, take it if you can. Tax-advantaged accounts also matter. A 401k, 403b, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, or other retirement account can help the money compound more efficiently depending on the structure. Taxes are one of the largest drags on wealth over time. If you can reduce, defer, or eliminate certain taxes legally through retirement accounts, the compounding process improves. I especially like the idea of tax-free growth when appropriate. A Roth IRA can be powerful because the money is contributed after tax, and qualified withdrawals later can be tax-free. That means if the account compounds for decades, the future growth may not be taxed in the same way. For someone with a long time horizon, that can be very valuable. The details depend on income, eligibility, tax rates, and personal circumstances. But the principle is clear. Use the tax code where it helps you build wealth. Do not try to build the first $100,000 while ignoring every legal advantage available. Now, for the investment itself, many people should keep it simple. Index funds, ETFs, broad market exposure, low fees, consistent contributions, set it and keep contributing. This does not sound exciting, but it works because it removes many ways to make mistakes. Most people do not need to pick the next great stock to reach the first 100,000. They need to save aggressively, invest consistently, avoid bad debt, and stay invested long enough for compounding to begin doing its work. That is the core. A broad index fund gives exposure to many companies. If one company fails, the whole portfolio is not destroyed. If the economy grows over time, the investor participates. If dividends are reinvested, compounding accelerates. If contributions continue through downturns, the investor buys more shares at lower prices. This is a powerful system. It is not guaranteed. Markets can fall. Returns can be disappointing for periods. Inflation can be difficult. But for long-term wealth building, broad ownership of productive companies has historically been one of the most effective tools ordinary people have. The key is staying with the process. Trust the math, but also respect the risk. Trust the process, but do not confuse the process with certainty. Investing always has uncertainty. The reason to invest is not that the future is guaranteed. The reason to invest is that holding only cash guarantees exposure to inflation and missed compounding. Now, the source uses a two-pronged approach. The first prong is investing in the stock market through retirement accounts and simple funds. The second prong is saving for a down payment to buy a home. If you know you want to settle in a specific area, this is important because there are different kinds of wealth engines. Stocks can compound through business growth, dividends, reinvestment, and market appreciation. A home can build wealth through leverage, inflation, debt paydown, and long-term appreciation. But a home is not the same as a stock portfolio. It is illiquid. It requires maintenance, it carries taxes, insurance, repairs, transaction costs, and location risk. It can be a great tool if the situation fits, but it should not be treated casually. The home strategy works best when you are buying in an area where you actually want to live, when the monthly payment fits your budget, when you have reserves, when the purchase does not destroy your ability to invest, and when you understand that a home is both an asset and a responsibility. The example is simple. Suppose you save $40,000 for a down payment on a $400,000 home. If the home appreciates by 10%, the home value increases from $400,000 to $440,000. Your down payment was $40,000 and the property gained $40,000 in value. That is the power of leverage. You controlled a $400,000 asset with a $40,000 down payment. That can accelerate wealth, but leverage works in both directions. If the home falls by 10%, your equity can be severely damaged if expenses rise, if you lose income, if repairs appear, if the neighborhood weakens, if insurance increases, if property taxes rise. The home can create stress. So the lesson is not buy any house at any price. The lesson is that housing can be a wealth engine if used carefully. Inflation can help a homeowner because the mortgage may be fixed while wages, rents, and home values rise over time. Debt becomes easier to manage in real terms if income rises and the payment is fixed, but this only works if the payment was affordable in the first place. A fixed mortgage that you can comfortably afford can become a powerful tool. A mortgage that stretches you too far can become a trap. This is why the down payment money should be saved safely. If you need the money for a home purchase in the near future, you should not put it into volatile assets where a market decline can cut the balance right before you need it. A high-yield savings account can make sense for down payment savings because the job of that money is not maximum return. The job is safety, liquidity, and preservation. If the account pays 4 or 5%, that helps. But the main purpose is making sure the cash is available when the opportunity arrives. Different dollars have different jobs. Retirement dollars can be long-term. Down payment dollars may be short. Term emergency dollars must be safe. Investment dollars can take risk. Confusing these categories causes problems. Now, when saving in a high-yield account, use a reputable financial institution. Do not chase a slightly higher rate at a questionable bank or platform you do not understand. Safety matters when the money has a specific near-term purpose. This is another principle. Yield is not the only variable. Trust, insurance, liquidity, and operational safety matter. A slightly higher interest rate is not worth taking unnecessary risk with money you need for a down payment or emergency fund. Now, let us return to the first 100,000. Why is it so psychologically important? Because it proves the system works. A person who has never saved meaningful money may secretly doubt they can. They may believe they are just not good with money. They may believe investing is for other people. They may believe wealth is something that happens to high earners or lucky people. Then they reach the first 10,000. Something changes. Then 25,000, then 50,000, then 100,000. At 100,000, the person has proof. They have proof they can create surplus, proof they can keep money, proof they can invest, proof they can delay gratification, proof they can survive the boring phase, proof they can build a machine. That psychological proof matters almost as much as the money. Because once a person believes they can build 100,000, the next question appears. If I can build 100,000, can I build 200? If I can build 200, can I build 500? If I can build 500, can I build 1 million? This is how identity changes. At first, saving feels like sacrifice. Later, saving feels like strength. At first, investing feels abstract. Later, investing feels like ownership. At first, compound growth feels invisible. Later, compound growth becomes obvious. The person changes. The account changes because the person changes. That is why the first 100,000 is so important. It is not only a financial milestone, it is an identity milestone. Now, there is a dangerous period before the milestone, the grind phase. This is where many people quit. They save for 6 months and see little progress. They invest and the market falls. They cut expenses, but inflation absorbs the improvement. They try to increase income, but the first attempt fails. They compare themselves to others and feel behind. This is the part where the penny still looks like a penny. The process feels broken because the results are small. But small results at the beginning do not mean the system is broken. They mean the compounding base is still small. The correct response is not to quit. The correct response is to keep feeding the machine. If the savings rate is too low, improve it. If the income is too low, work on the income side. If spending is unconscious, track it. If debt is high, interest, attack it. If investments are too complicated, simplify them. If you are waiting to start, start small. This is how the boring phase is shortened. Not by magic. By intensity. There is a phrase from Charlie Munger that is often repeated: the first 100,000 is a difficult milestone, but you have to do it. Find a way to get your hands on $100,000. The point is not that every person will do it the same way. The point is that the milestone is important enough to justify unusual focus. For some people, that means taking extra shifts. For some, it means building a side income. For some, it means living with roommates longer. For some, it means driving an older car. For some, it means saying no to vacations for a few years. For some, it means changing careers. For some, it means moving to a lower cost area. For some, it means aggressively learning a skill that raises income. For some, it means selling unused things, lowering fixed expenses, and automating investments. Different tactics, same principle: get to the compounding threshold. Now, people sometimes hear this and think it sounds harsh. It is harsh, but reality is harsher if you never build assets. A person with no savings has no margin of safety. A car repair becomes a crisis, a job loss becomes desperation, inflation becomes suffocation, a medical bill becomes debt, a family need becomes a financial emergency. Every unexpected event becomes more dangerous because there is no base. The first 100,000 does not solve every problem, but it changes the system. It gives you liquidity. It gives you confidence. It gives you investment growth. It gives you options. It gives you the first real evidence that your money can work for you. Before that, you are mostly working for money. After that, money begins working with you. That is a major shift. Now let's talk about the unfair advantage of having money. People like to say everyone has the same opportunity if they work hard. That is not exactly true. The person with capital has a different kind of opportunity. They can invest in downturns. They can buy assets when others are forced to sell. They can start businesses. They can negotiate from strength. They can avoid high-interest debt. They can wait for better opportunities. Capital creates optionality. This is why the wealthy often stay wealthy. They are not always smarter. They are not always harder working. They simply have a machine already running. Their capital produces income. Their assets appreciate. Their investments compound. Their liquidity allows them to survive and buy during chaos. The beginner has to build the machine from labor first. That is why the first 100,000 is so critical. It is the point where you begin moving from pure labor dependence toward capital assistance. You are not fully free yet, but you are no longer at zero, and zero is the hardest place. At zero, all wealth must come from future effort. At 100,000, part of future wealth can come from existing capital. That changes the trajectory. Now, the home down payment part is also about using leverage and inflation intelligently. Inflation hurts consumers because prices rise, but inflation can help owners of certain assets because the nominal value of assets may rise too. If you own a home with fixed rate debt, inflation may raise the price of the home and reduce the real burden of the debt over time. This is one reason owning assets matters. People who only hold cash and wages are exposed to inflation. People who own productive or scarce assets may be partially protected. A home is not always a good investment. It depends on price, location, financing, maintenance, taxes, and time horizon. But for many households, buying a reasonable home in a place they intend to stay can help build net worth because the mortgage forces saving, the debt amortizes, and inflation may increase the value of the asset over time. But do not confuse leverage with free money. Leverage amplifies, it does not guarantee. If you buy too expensive a home, if the payment prevents investing, if you have no emergency fund, if you are forced to sell early, the home can delay wealth instead of accelerating it. The right sequence is important. Build emergency reserves, invest consistently, save for a down payment safely, buy only when the numbers work. Do not buy a home simply because people say renting is throwing money away. Renting can be rational when ownership costs are too high, when you need flexibility, or when you are not ready for the responsibility. Ownership is powerful when used correctly. It is dangerous when rushed. Now, let's think about net worth. Net worth is assets minus liabilities. Many people focus only on income because income is visible. But net worth is the scoreboard of what remains after spending debt, and ownership are accounted for. A high-income person with no savings and lots of debt may have low net worth. A moderate income person with strong savings, investments, and low debt may quietly build a much stronger position. This is why the first 100,000 of net worth matters more than the first 100,000 of income. Income is a flow. Net worth is what the flow built. A person can earn $100,000 every year and still be broke if every dollar flows out. A person earning much less can reach 100,000 in net worth if they maintain a strong savings rate and invest consistently. The goal is not only to earn, the goal is to convert earnings into ownership. That conversion is the essence of wealth building. Now, how do you accelerate the conversion? First, know your numbers. What comes in, what goes out, what is saved, what is invested, what debt do you have, what interest rates are you paying, what accounts are you using, what employer match is available, what tax advantages are available. What is your net worth today? If you do not know the numbers, you do not have a plan, you have a feeling. Feelings are not enough. Second, increase the gap between income and expenses. Cut the waste, keep what matters. Raise income, avoid lifestyle inflation. Every extra dollar in the gap becomes fuel. Third, invest the gap automatically. Do not rely on willpower. Put the money into retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, index funds, ETFs, or appropriate investments based on your plan. Make it happen before the money becomes emotionally available for spending. Fourth, protect the system, keep an emergency fund, avoid high-interest debt, do not invest short-term money in long-term risk assets. Use reputable financial institutions, do not chase scams, do not follow random hype. Fifth, keep going through boredom. Boredom is part of the process. The early years may not look impressive. That does not mean they are unimportant. They are the years when the foundation is created. Now, many people want to know how fast they can get to $100,000. The answer depends on savings rate and return. If you save $5,000 per year, it will take longer. If you save $10,000 faster, if you save $20,000 much faster. If you combine saving with income growth, faster still investment returns help. But early on the contribution rate matters more. That is why the first stage is mostly about behavior and income. Later returns become more dominant. This is another curve people misunderstand. Early stage savings rate matters most. Middle stage savings rate and investment returns both matter. Later stage investment returns can dominate. At $1 million, a 10% year produces $100,000 before taxes. At that point, the portfolio can grow by more in a year than many people can save from labor. That is the explosive phase. But to get there, you need the base. No base, no explosion. That is the whole lesson. Now, I want to address the emotional pain of sacrifice. People hear sacrifice and think it means losing life. But sacrifice simply means choosing one thing over another. Every financial decision is already a sacrifice. If you spend the money today, you sacrifice future freedom. If you save and invest it, you sacrifice some present comfort. There is no path with no sacrifice. The question is which sacrifice you prefer. Do you prefer short-term pain for long-term gain, or long-term dependence for short-term comfort? That is the real trade. Financial freedom is not built by pretending there are no trade-offs. It is built by choosing the trade-offs consciously. If reaching 100,000 requires driving an older car, living with roommates, cooking more, delaying upgrades, learning skills after work, or taking extra projects, that may be difficult. But the difficulty is temporary if it builds a stronger system. The difficulty of having no assets can last much longer. That is the comparison, not sacrifice versus no sacrifice, temporary sacrifice versus permanent fragility. Now, discipline alone can sound cold, so I want to say something important. If you are starting from very little, the path will not always feel fair. Inflation may make life expensive. Housing may feel impossible. Wages may not rise enough. Healthcare and insurance may be painful. Student loans or family obligations may slow you down. Some people start with advantages you do not have. That is real. But the existence of unfairness does not eliminate the usefulness of strategy. You can acknowledge that the system is difficult and still build a plan. You can admit the first 100,000 is hard and still pursue it. You can recognize that rich people have structural advantages and still work to create your own compounding base. Do not let resentment replace action. Action is the only thing that changes your balance sheet. Now let's think about the two-pronged strategy in more detail. Prong 1, invest in the stock market. Use retirement accounts where possible, capture employer matches, use low-cost index funds or ETFs, automate contributions, reinvest dividends, increase contributions as income rises, stay invested through volatility. Prong 2, save for a home down payment if buying a home fits your life. Keep that money in safe liquid accounts. Do not gamble with it. Buy only when the location, time horizon, payment, and reserves make sense. Use fixed-rate debt carefully. Let inflation and leverage work for you rather than against you. Together, these can build wealth through both liquid financial assets and real estate exposure. But the order matters. Do not buy a house that prevents you from investing. Do not invest your house down payment in something volatile right before you need it. Do not take on a mortgage without reserves. Do not ignore retirement accounts while saving for a home. Balance matters. Now, why do I like the stock market prong so much? Because it is accessible. A person can start with small amounts. They can own shares of great companies. They can diversify. They can automate. They can use tax-advantaged accounts. They do not need to manage tenants or repair roofs. They do not need to borrow large sums to begin. This makes stocks a practical starting point for many people. The stock market is volatile, but the volatility is visible. That visibility can be scary, but it also gives feedback. You learn. You can add during declines, you can rebalance, you can see the account grow over years. If the first 100,000 is the goal, liquid investments can help you measure progress. Now, why do I like the home prong when done correctly? Because a home can force long-term discipline. It can give stability. It can allow you to benefit from fixed-rate debt in an inflationary world. It can give you exposure to real estate appreciation. It can build equity through principal paydown. It can create a sense of security, but the home must fit the plan. A home that is too expensive can steal the cash flow needed to reach 100,000. A home that creates constant repairs can weaken the system. A home bought in the wrong location or at the wrong price can trap you. So the home is not automatically good. It is good when the numbers work. This is a principle for everything. Good assets at bad prices can become bad investments. Bad assets do not become good investments because of leverage. A good strategy can fail if executed with poor timing, poor sizing, or poor discipline. Now, as you work toward 100,000, there are some behaviors that can dramatically delay the process. High interest credit card debt, oversized car payments, lifestyle inflation after raises, frequent phone and gadget upgrades, luxury spending for social approval, expensive housing too early, investing in things you do not understand, panic selling during downturns, waiting too long to start, ignoring income growth. These are not small leaks. They are holes in the boat. A person trying to reach the first 100,000 must plug the holes. Once the boat is not leaking, the engine can push forward. Now, there are also behaviors that accelerate the journey: automating savings, capturing employer match using Roth or tax, advantaged accounts where appropriate, keeping investments simple, increasing income, saving raises instead of spending them, living below your means, tracking net worth monthly or quarterly, building an emergency fund, keeping down payment savings safe, buying assets instead of symbols. These behaviors compound too. We often talk about money compounding, but habits compound first. A small habit repeated for years becomes a system. A system repeated for years becomes an identity. An identity repeated for years becomes wealth. This is the sequence. Now, what happens after 100,000? You do not stop. That is a mistake. Some people hit a milestone and relax too much. They feel they have proven something, then lifestyle inflation enters. They buy a car, upgrade housing, spend more, and reduce the savings rate just as the machine is starting to work. Do not do that. Celebrate, but do not destroy the base. The first 100,000 is the launch pad, not the destination. Once you reach it, continue investing. Increase the base. Let compounding do more. Move toward 200,000, 500,000, 1 million. The larger the base, the more powerful the annual growth can become. At some point, the portfolio may earn more in a year than you contribute. Then, if the portfolio becomes large enough, it may earn more than your job in certain years. That is when the system has truly changed. But the early discipline must remain. A person who reaches 100,000 and then treats it like spending money can fall back quickly. The money must have a job. Its job is to compound. Now, I want to explain why this matters for financial freedom. Financial freedom is not only being rich, it is having enough assets that you are not completely dependent on the next paycheck. The first 100,000 does not make you financially free, but it moves you closer. It gives you a buffer, it gives you confidence, it gives you investment momentum, it gives you optionality. You may still need to work, you may still have bills, you may still face risks, but the trajectory is different. Before 100,000, your future depends almost entirely on labor. After 100,000, your future begins to depend on both labor and capital. The more capital grows, the less dependent you become on labor. That is the path to freedom. Not overnight, not magically, mechanically. Now, there is a reason I keep using the word mechanical. Good wealth building should not depend on constantly feeling inspired. Inspiration fades. Discipline is unreliable if it has no structure. A mechanical system continues. Money comes in, a portion goes to investments, a portion goes to safe savings for near-term goals, expenses are controlled, income is increased, debt is avoided or eliminated, net worth is tracked. The process repeats. That is the machine. A machine does not care whether you are excited. It keeps working. The goal is to build the machine and then keep feeding it. Now, the penny example at the beginning shows why patience matters. The first 20 days of a compounding process often feel underwhelming. Then the curve steepens. Most people quit before the curve becomes visible. They look at the early numbers and assume the process is too slow. But compounding always looks slow before it looks fast. That is its nature. You cannot skip the slow part. You can shorten it through higher income, higher savings rate, and earlier investing. But you cannot eliminate it entirely. The foundation must be built. The mistake is thinking that slow progress means no progress. Slow progress repeated is how the explosion is prepared. That is the lesson of the penny. That is the lesson of the first 100,000. Now, if you are already above 100,000, the lesson is still relevant. It means the machine is already running. Do not interrupt it unnecessarily. Do not take reckless risks because you are bored. Do not abandon a working compounding system for excitement. Increase the quality of the assets. Diversify, manage taxes, keep cash reserves, continue growing income, avoid lifestyle inflation. The danger after success is overconfidence. The danger before success is discouragement. Both can damage the process. A principled investor avoids both. Now, if you are below 100,000, the message is not that you are failing. The message is that you are in the hardest phase. Do not judge the process too early. Do not compare day 10 of your penny to someone else's day 20. 8. You do not know their starting point, inheritance, income, risks, or liabilities. Your job is to build your own base. The first phase is slow. That is normal. The first phase is work. That is normal. The first phase requires sacrifice. That is normal. But it does not last forever if you keep going. This is the optimistic part. The math is hard early, but the math begins helping later. That is the whole point. Now, I want to give the simplest possible action plan. First, calculate your net worth today. Assets minus liabilities. No hiding, no guessing. Write it down. Second, calculate how much you can save each month. If the number is too low, look at both expenses and income. Third, create an emergency fund so life does not force you into high-interest debt. Fourth, contribute to retirement accounts, especially enough to capture any employer match. Fifth, invest simply in low cost diversified funds unless you have a clear reason and knowledge to do something else. Sixth, increase contributions whenever income rises. Seventh, if buying a home fits your life, save the down payment in a safe high-yield account at a reputable institution. Eighth, avoid large lifestyle commitments that slow the journey. Ninth, review net worth regularly, but do not obsess over daily market movement. 10th, keep going until the first 100,000 arrives and then keep going after that. This is not complicated. It is difficult because it requires behavior. But the math is clear. Now, the final point is this. Everyone says they want to be wealthy. But most people do not want the boring phase. They want the explosion, but not the base. They want the day 30 result, but not day 1 through day 20. They want the money to make money, but they do not want to first save enough money for the money to matter. That is the gap between desire and reality. The people who get wealthy learn to respect the boring phase. They know that boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the price of compounding. You invest each paycheck, you avoid waste. You increase income, you do not panic sell, you save the down payment safely, you capture the match, you use the Roth IRA if it fits, you keep buying the index funds, you let the process run. And one day, the numbers begin to move in a way that feels different. At first, your money earns enough to buy dinner, then enough to cover a bill, then enough to equal a month of savings, then enough to equal a year of savings, then, in some years, enough to equal more than you earn from work. That is the explosion. But it is not magic. It is the result of building the base. So if you want your net worth to explode, do not chase the explosion, chase the first 100,000. Make that the mission. Get there through work discipline. Income growth, spending control, investing retirement accounts, simple funds, and safe saving for major goals. The first 100,000 will likely be the hardest. That is why it is the most important. Because once you cross that threshold, the game begins to change. Your money starts helping you. The curve begins to bend. The process becomes less dependent on brute force and more dependent on the machine you built. That is how people get rich. They trust the math, they trust the process, and they keep going long enough for compounding to stop looking boring and start looking like freedom.